Attention, please. How is your level of focus? I must admit, mine has been a little bit fragmented over the last 2.5 years, but our attention matters hugely. It impacts pretty much everything we do. The quality of our attention is going to determine the quality of our relationships, how well we can focus on anything that we care about in our lives. And ultimately, it's going to impact our sense of fulfillment and accomplishment. Now, here's what one of the world's peak performers has to say on the topic of focus and attention. This is Nadia Boulanger. She's been described as the world's leading music teacher. So she taught some of the greatest composers and musicians of the 20th century. Nadia Boulanger. Nadia says, anyone, and let me open up my window so it's spotlighted for everybody. Anyone who acts without paying attention to what he's doing is wasting his life. I'd go so far as to say that life is denied by a lack of attention, whether it be cleaning windows or writing a masterpiece. Attention, it impacts pretty much everything we do. So today we are going to have a look at a stolen focus, why you can't pay attention, and how to think deeply again, by Johann Hari. Johann covers a lot of different things in this book. There are some really important ideas, and we'll be sharing them. And at the end of today's talk, as always, I'll be asking you which ideas are most important to you. For those that don't know me, my name's Eric Winters, and I'm a leadership coach. I help people have better conversations at work. What kind of conversations? Well, coaching conversations, solution-focused conversations to help other people solve their own problems. Difficult conversations, helping people to improve, so performance-driven conversations. Also, collaborative conversations. How can we disagree constructively with one another? Conversations are, of course, hugely impacted by our quality of attention and our focus. So let's jump right in. Johann kicks off the book talking about the multitasking delusion, this idea we have that we can do more than one thing at the same time without much consequence. Now, it is true, of course, we could all walk and talk, no problem. But try to do two more cognitive tasks, thinky tasks at the same time, and we'll quickly run into trouble. Try to talk to someone on a new topic at the same time as writing a report or an email, or trying to do a math sum in your head. We won't get very far. Now, I run a number of workshops for graduates in the Australian public service. Really bright, very clever people. And at the start of the workshop, I'll often say, look, could you just put your phones away and we'll begin. And there's often a ripple of panic goes through the room, a ripple of panic as people have to put their phones away. And a number of them will say, hang on, Eric, you're thinking we're distracted by our phones. No, we've grown up with technology. Our minds have adapted. We've changed. Now, the truth is that we all share the same human architecture, and brains have not changed. They might be quite comfortable switching between different things, but all of us, whether you're a grad or an older individual, more mature individual, all of us experience a price when we switch topics, when we're thinking about one thing and then thinking about another. There is a cost, and the cost is quite high because the brain has to kind of clear the decks, bring in new information, think about something else. So every time you're working on one thing and then you get a text and you just glance at the text just for a few moments, you're clearing the decks, you're thinking about the text, then you're turning back to your work and you're starting again. It costs energy. Now, Hewlett-Packard did a study on their workers to see what kind of an impact was there on people who were interrupted during their working lives, interrupted by texts, emails, that kind of thing, phone calls. And they found that on average, their workers experienced an IQ drop of 10 points. Now, when I heard 10, I thought, well, is 10 a lot or a little? Then I had a look, and it turns out there's only 30 points separating people who are averagely intelligent from mentally disabled. I can't afford to lose 10 of my IQ points. It's too high a price. But that's what happens when we allow ourselves to be interrupted. So I might just ask people here, does anyone here have any kids who spend quite a lot of time switching between technologies? Perhaps they might be sitting in front of the TV and they're talking to you and looking at their phone. Is anyone yet? Eileen, you have. It's a common thing I hear from parents that their kids, they're very comfortable. Monica, you too. They're very comfortable flicking between, but they're not fully present to any of those one things. And we're certainly not learning as well as we could. We owe it to ourselves to manage our attention, manage the interruptions and distractions, and intentionally choose to do one thing at a time. The next thing that Johann talks about is a delicious form of focus called flow. Now, this is that state, hopefully we're all at least somewhat familiar with it, where we're immersed in a task. We are completely absorbed in doing one thing. So it's a form of monotasking in which we're completely absorbed. And the people who experience more flow in life experience more well-being. This has been very well researched. The positive psychologists on the call today will well know the name of Michal Csikszentmihalyi, the guy who's really investigated flow in depth. Flow nourishes our minds. We want to have more of it in life. And there are three things that we need in order to experience more flow. Hence the 3 ticks. Thing number 1, we need to have a goal, a clearly defined goal. One goal, not 5. We're working on one thing. Step 2, it needs to be meaningful. It's got to matter to us somehow. Something about it is important. Step 3, it's got to be challenging. It can't be too easy, but it mustn't be overwhelming either. And we need to have a goal that's testing us somewhat. We can introduce flow into our lives. Whenever we're doing something, we can choose to break it down into clearly defined single parts. We can ask ourselves, what's important about this? Why does it matter to me? And finally, we can make it a little bit more challenging. I like to give myself a deadline with tasks. Otherwise, they just drift in throughout the whole day. But I might say, no, I'm going to do this by 11. I'm going to get it done by 11 or by 12. If you can find a way to make it challenging, it will activate this deep well of focus that you have within you. Flow. Next, and this is pretty mundane, but sleep is absolutely, not yet. The dolphin comes back in a moment. Sleep, absolutely critical to our ability to focus. The greatest book written on this topic, I think, is Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. And Matthew describes how it's during the night that our brains get a kind of a cleanup. They get detoxified. Wakefulness is akin, he says, to low-level brain damage every day. When you're awake, your brain is being damaged. There's all sorts of, sometimes called brain poo, waste products of metabolism being created and put between your brain cells. But at night, if you get a good night's sleep, you get a kind of brain rinse. And this cerebrospinal fluid washes through your brain and it cleans it out. And this is one of the reasons why if you don't get a good night's sleep, all of us are a bit groggy and not working so well the next day. The other thing to say about sleep is that it de-stresses us. And we'll hear later on, stress is not good for focus. But good sleep can reduce our stress. And the reason is, every night while you're sleeping, you and I get an emotional intelligence makeover. Your emotional circuits get tuned. Now, they say time heals all wounds. But it's not any old time, it's sleep time. the time while we're asleep, having quality sleep, that's when the brain works on past hurts and present concerns, and it moderates them, it manages the stress. So we need to sleep well in order to manage our stress and clean our brain, as well as many other things. So it's a bit ordinary, got to sleep well, but it's critical. It makes a phenomenal difference to your ability to concentrate. Now, time for the dolphin. Why am I showing a dolphin? Something interesting happens with dolphins when they sleep. Now, you'll remember, I'm sure everyone will remember, that dolphins are mammals. Mammals breathe air. And if you're in the sea and you fall asleep and you just sink to the bottom, you'll stop breathing. Dolphins can't afford to do that. So they actually put one half of their brain to sleep at a time. First the right side, then the left side. And curiously, one eye shuts while they're doing this. But it means they're just awake enough to go up and keep breathing. Now, you and I can't do this. But if you get a really bad night's sleep, part of your brain will go offline. Part of it will go to sleep. They call it local sleep. And if you're ever really groggy in the morning and someone asks you a question that normally you could answer in an instant, and you're going, that's local sleep. Part of your brain actually is asleep. It's a bad sign. We need to get on top of our sleeping habits. We need to prioritize our sleep so that we don't end up even slightly like a dolphin with part of our brain going to sleep. Next, reading. How is people's reading these days? Fiction reading. I'd be keen to hear if anyone has been like me. I've got to confess, my reading has taken a hit in these last few years. It's just been really hard to, it feels, to focus, pick up a book and stay with it. Reading, Monica, yours is poor too. Yeah, audiobook. I love audiobooks too, but it's not quite the same. And look, Georgia, your feeling is non-fictional. Unfortunately, there's something about fiction reading which is especially good for managing our focus and our attention. Rachel, you wait until you're on holiday. How delicious to give yourself that treat. And yes, Russ, same as me. My reading capability, it's taken a hit since we've been spending more time on screens. Now, reading on screens, it turns out, is not the same as reading a book. When we read from a device, from a laptop, iPad, a website, our reading is sort of jumpy. We skim, we leap around. But when we read from a book, from a hard copy book, we stay with the topic. There's more focus. It asks more of you. I think we've all felt that. It's more demanding. But it's that demanding activity that trains the brain to get better at focusing. The other wonderful thing I learned about reading books is it turns out it makes you more emotionally intelligent. Fiction. Now, how does it do this? It does it by dialing up one part of emotional intelligence, not all parts, one part. Empathy. People who read fiction have more empathy. They stay with a character throughout their trials and tribulations. They think about what would it be like to be that individual, and it builds empathy. The good news is, parents, when you read to your child, that also builds their empathy. More so than kids that don't get books read to them, apparently. So we want to read books, either reading them to other people, young people, or read them for yourself. What was next? Mind wandering. I used to think mind wandering was a bad thing, something to be avoided. But it turns out mind wandering, not daydreaming, but mind wandering is something quite different, and it's quite important. So mind wandering is where you are allowing your mind to explore ideas. Now, this is, I have to say, the opposite of what normally I do when I go for a walk, because I have got into the habit of listening to podcasts. I adore podcasts. And it's lovely to either listen to an audiobook or tap into a podcast. However, we've all, I think, got ourselves into the habit nowadays of often plugging in to some form of stimulation. And look, it's a wonderful thing to do, but mind wandering happens when we're not plugged in, when we allow ourselves to go for a stroll without anything in our ears, and we just walk and let our mind explore, unpack ideas, and we get creative. Our mind makes sense of the world when we're walking along and allowing our mind to reflect on things, put things together, and people often get insights. They become very creative. How many of you might have come up with an idea, something that's been on the back burner while you were maybe having a shower or doing something else? Has anyone had that experience? Yeah, while having a piccolo, Georgia. Lovely, lovely. I think it's quite a mindful exercise to immersing yourself in the flavour. Walking, bike riding, Russ, showering and bird watching. Yep, all of these things, the wonderful context. And Heidi, you felt it a lot. It happens a lot. I'm messing around with the slides there. Yes, we need to put ourselves into situations where we're not entertaining ourselves with technology. We're allowing our mind to make connections and be creative. Next, we've got to talk about it, our tech. We have become stimulation hungry, and it's just too easy now, isn't it? At any time of the day, if you're even slightly bored, to relieve that temporary boredom with something on our phones. Can everyone here admit to feeling the urge to check your phone, just to have a look at that email, to have a look at the news, just to have a look? Yeah, Heidi, me too. There's just that urge. It's often there. It's often there. Like a hand magnet, Karen. I like that. It's true. Remember though, every time we do that, we are interrupting our monotasking and we're switching. We're switching our brain onto something else, and there will be a price when we come back. Also, we're being trained by our technology to be intolerant of mild boredom. In fact, it's not even boredom. We're intolerant of being slightly entertained. We've now got to be supremely entertained continually. So we've got to start managing our tech. Now, apparently only 1/3 of people actually have edited or controlled the notifications on their phone. You know, all of the apps in the phone, they're all reaching out, giving us nudges, telling us when things are coming up or are happening. Notifications, turn them off. Get in there, turn them off. Of course, we can also program the phones now to do not disturb us during certain times of the day. We need to take charge of our phones so that they're not taking charge of us. Now, I've actually written down six things that I wanted to mention about the problems of using technology. This is what Johann says. He says there's 6 problems. Number 1, they train us, apps, websites, to crave frequent rewards. I feel that. We're being trained. Number 2, they encourage switching and the price that comes with. No wonder we feel frazzled sometimes at the end of the day when we've been jumping between tasks. The apps are learning about our vulnerabilities. Whenever we're using, say, Google, using Gmail, everything you write in Gmail, every email is read. They know you. They understand you well. Everything you do on Facebook, on LinkedIn, it's being monitored, and for how long you do it. We're being learnt about and then manipulated as a consequence afterwards. People who spend more time on social media are angrier. That's number 4. They're more angry. As a result, number 5, people are more vigilant in the rest of their life for danger. We're looking for what's wrong. in life when we spend too long on social media. And the sixth problem with spending time is, especially social media, it spreads bad news 6 times faster than good news. So bad news just escalates and people end up buying into some very, very weird fake news, terrible ideas. It just spreads so far. Now, tech is also wonderful, but we need to manage it. We need to be in charge of it rather than it being in charge of us. Let's get back to my screen here. Tech. Next, stress. It's hard to focus when we're stressed. None of us can focus well. Now, unfortunately, this can't be easily fixed by deep breathing or going for a walk. There are many stressors in life which are not going to be solved easily. Now, yes, we do need to take care of ourselves, but Johann spends a lot of time talking about one of the biggest causes of stress right now, and that's financial stress. The world is getting more expensive. It's not just what we eat, but it's the shelter, our fuel, everything is becoming harder and harder to afford. And inevitably, financial stress is weighing hard on a lot of people. So a study by the University of Chicago had a look at cane growers in India. And it looked at their stress levels and their ability to focus and concentrate before the harvest, when they do not know if they're going to have a good harvest, it's going to be successful. And remember, most of their income depends upon having, not on growing sugarcane, but on harvesting it and selling it. They found that after the harvest, after a successful harvest, these cane growers' IQ jumped by 13 points. In other words, it was held back, it was crushed by 13 points while they were stressed. Now, we need to find ways to make sure that our workplaces, whatever your workplace is, has low levels of stress. Organizational psychologists talk about psychological safety. So we do need workplaces where if we're going to do good work, think, focus, pay attention, learn and collaborate, we need to manage anxiety in the workplace. But some organizations are getting very innovative about how we can lower stress even further. And I'd like to make a quick call out to Perpetual Guardian in New Zealand. Perpetual Guardian had an experiment. I think it was for 2 months. They decided they were going to work 4 days a week and not 5. And the belief of the CEO was, if done right, it would be possible to maintain productivity, but reduce stress, and everyone would be happier, more engaged, but they'd still be paid the same amount. He wasn't going to pay them less. He said, you've got to do what you're doing now in 4 days. I'm going to give you a chance. They did the experiment, and it was studied by the University of Auckland. It worked. Stress dropped, productivity stayed the same in some areas and went up in others. And everyone was happier. Everyone was more pleased about working with Perpetual Guardian. In France, they recognise that work stress is also debilitating the nation, and they've put in place laws to restrict when employers can phone or email or text their employees after work. So there's an agreement in your contract to minimise the stress that's created by being on call outside of work hours. We've got to manage our stress. Next, fuel. Very quickly, again, this is sort of a bit ordinary, isn't it? Fuel, but the food we eat. Now, again, Johann says there are 3 problems with the food we eat. 1, there are a lot of carbs and sugar in what we're eating right now. This results in sugar, blood sugar going up and then crashing. Now, your focus is great while your blood sugar is going up. Wonderful. But on the other side, all of us find it hard to concentrate when our blood sugar takes a dip, and it always does. And dreadful news for you, Georgia, is that Dreadful news for us all, really, is that if we are coffee drinkers, this only it only amplifies the effect. And you've had two. I think you're indicating you're in your second. Yeah, me too. So the first problem with fuel, the sugar and the carbs. Carbs, remember, just get turned into sugar. The next thing is the food that we're eating is also nutritionally poor now. A lot of it's been stored for a long time. There are fewer nutrients in the food we're eating. It's also highly processed. And your brain, it's tempting to think, oh, my brain was built when I was a teenager, wasn't it? It's been built. It doesn't matter what I eat now. No, all the brain cells, the components of all the walls are being continually replaced by what you're eating today. We need high quality fuel for keeping our brain working well. And the third thing Johann draws attention to is, look, not only is our food nutritionally poor, but it's also got a lot of additives. It could have pesticides, coloring agents, a lot of things which have now been shown. They're discovering that a lot of this is affecting our neurology. Some coloring agents have only just been taken off the market because of what they were doing to children's attention. We need to eat more food that actually looks like food. I'm mindful we've got very little time left, so let me move on. With movement, our brains, our focus, we work better when we move. And yet, the nature of our lives nowadays is, it's so easy to stay at home and watch Netflix. It's so easy to take the car, to take the lift, to take the escalator or the travelator. Now, I was in a shopping centre yesterday, and the travelators there, they've got them with a slight angle. It's not like that. It's a slight angle. And I'd say pretty much 85% of people, because I had a little look, were just stationary. The moment they step onto a travelator, they stop moving. It's like their legs don't work anymore. Whoops. I'll go the wrong way again. We've got to move. We need to move in our life. We need to intentionally choose sometimes not to get in the lift or to get on the travelator and keep moving. Finally, wrapping up, we need to take steps to reclaim our focus. There's a fabulous book, which I've just got to say I enjoyed even more than this one. It's called Peak Mind by Professor Amishi Yar. That's J-H-A, Professor of Psychology at the University of Miami. She spent 30 years studying attention. She says there's only one thing which predictably, reliably will develop your ability to focus. It's mindfulness meditation. And Dr. Amishi says what's needed, and there's a lot of debate about this, oh, but how much? How much? She says, look, from her research, the tipping point is when you spend at least 12 minutes a day, 5 days a week. 12 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Good things happen, significantly good things happen at that point. Now, sure, if you can't do that, you can manage 10 minutes, 4 times a day, there's still benefit, but significant benefit if you can extend to 12 at least 5 times, and much bigger benefits yet if you can extend it further. Number 1, mindfulness. Number 2, we need to tune our tech. We need to be in charge. We need to adjust those notifications, turn it off sometimes. You can even buy a device called a K-Safe, which is it's like a Tupperware box, really, but you can program it not to let you open it and remove your phone for a period of time. So you could set it so that it's off maybe for 3 hours, 4 hours. You can configure it. We need to take control of our tech. We need to plan our time during the day. Specifically, decide to monotask. So don't hope for the best, plan it into your day. And maybe you'll plan when you are going to check your mail. So yes, of course you're going to read your email. You're going to do it at 11 o'clock, 2 o'clock, but you decide. Next, the physiology. We've got to attend to this foundation. We need to sleep well. We've got to eat real food, and we need to move not just once a day or twice a day, but throughout the day. We can't be sitting throughout the day. Our brains come alive when we move often. Next, We need to get out and let our minds wander as our legs wander. We need to walk without technology. Not always, but sometimes. Johann Hari says he does this now for an hour every day. Makes sure he walks without technology. Finally, Johann spends 6 months of his year in 2 3-month blocks not connecting to Facebook, Twitter, and all the rest of it at all. He fasts. Now, you might choose to do that, or you might choose to fast during the day. You might say, well, you know what? I'll have a look. I'll check my Facebook feed, but not until 1 o'clock or when I've done my work. We need to manage our time. We need to dial it back. And finally, we can all choose to engage flow, to choose deliberately to monotask and to ask ourselves before we work on something, what's important about this? Why does this matter? Bring it front of mind, and that will assist you in activating your flow, your focus, especially if you can make it the task a little bit challenging. So we've covered quite a lot. To wrap up, we've looked at 10 different things. I'm wondering which of these is perhaps front of mind for you right now. We looked at multitasking and how it's a myth, it's a delusion. We can't do it. We've got to monotask. We talked about flow, activating that deep focus by knowing why things matter. Importance of sleep, reading fiction, how that can help, letting our mind wander, managing our tech, dialing down our stress where we can, eating nutritious fuel for our brain, movement to activate our brain, and some other things, including mindfulness for reclaiming focus. In the chat box, could I ask you to let me know, what do you think might be the first thing that you'll do to increase the quality of your focus in your life? I'm keen to see. Mind wandering, Karen. Yep, it's a lovely thing to do for ourselves. I had a little wander this morning, actually, with a coffee, it must be said, but it was very helpful to think things through. Strength training, Russ. Great, lovely. Exercise, very much. Flow, Georgia. Yeah, and reading a bit of fiction. Do it. Reducing technonica. And diet, Karen. Me too. Me too. There's scope there for managing the diet. And Deb, you're going to take care of your sleep. There'll be big rewards for that. Huge rewards to support you. Important goal line. Yes, knowing why it's important. Focusing more so on to multitask and flow, Diana. People, thank you for joining me today. It's wonderful to see your faces. Thank you all for participating the way you have. And I wish you a day of delicious focus. Enjoy it.